All right, guys, what the hell is going on with the PTS Week 4? What do all these changes mean? How do we make sense of them? Is everything up in the air? What we were looking for huge changes. I think we're all looking for huge changes. And as I noted in the live stream on Monday, when we are looking over the patch notes, this is not it. We did not get huge sweeping changes, and a lot of people think that, and I'm one of them, that I think this is mostly just the way it is. ZOS is happy with what they've done, and they're sticking with it. So what has changed? Well, one, and I would say this is a very good change. Guys, I'm very critical of companies, of ZOS in particular, whenever they do things that don't make sense, right? You can reference my other videos. I also want to be just as effusive in a positive sense when they do great things. And I think changing the Arcanist beam ability to where now it is direct damage has had a really positive impact. Now, what has it done? Well, for those who don't know, one of the major changes is now the beam is not considered a damage over time ability. It's considered direct damage. So several ticks, I guess, of direct damage in a row. It's still a channeled ability. Well, what this has changed, the main thing is that on your back bar now, you're going to be running to run a Maelstrom two-handed weapon because that will buff your direct damage attacks. So in any kind of Arcanist build, you're going to definitely want to be running a two-handed back bar. This has also nerfed their damage. For, if you run the same build, it nerfed the damage a whole bunch. But if you change up your build to account for the fact that now it's direct damage, even if you're running that Arcanist Crow Nightblade build, damage has gone down about 7.5% from the top end. Okay. And that is significant. And its damage is still really high. The highest parse I've seen right now is 162K, right? Which is again it's at 7.5% off from the 175K parse that we've seen before. At least that's the highest one I had seen with a beam. And what that means is that their DPS has gone down. Now, with most of the other changes, nothing else has really greatly affected most of the skill lines. So some of those single target or less AoE focused, specifically non-beam builds that we were seeing that could parse up to 180K, many of them are basically the same. And so they can parse now higher than the beam. Not a ridiculous amount, less than 10% higher, but still more. And I think that's perfect. It doesn't need to be a huge gap, but if you're using the easiest ability in the game, it should do less damage than if you're doing a much more complicated and difficult rotation. However, it is still 100% viable. Nobody should be getting kicked out of a group for running a beam build, right? And you actually want some in your group because while that single target or more single target, they're not purely single target, but while that more single target build might be able to parse, 7.5% higher or 10% higher or whatever, it's not a huge gap, and you still want a lot of cleave. And actually, in the new trial, you probably want the cleave from the Arcanist beam in all of the fights. You're probably going to run that in just about all of them. Maybe not all of them, but close to it. So that is really good news. All of those single target fights are still using the Arcanist skill lines, okay? They are still using Herald of the Tomb, where you are using the other morph of Cephaliarch's Flail, Tentacular Dread, to get an 11% increase in damage. At least all the ones I've seen. I bet there's some out there that don't even use that. At least I hope there are. Hey guys, this is a good time to interrupt, guys. I make guides, and I give informative content on the Elder Scrolls Online and many other games. I do this independently. I don't work with a game studio because if they're paying me and sponsoring me to do videos, to me that's a conflict of interest. I work for you guys. So if you really like what I do, like and subscribe, absolutely. Another really cool thing is share the video. If this is helpful for you, maybe it'll be helpful for your friends. And if you really like what you see, consider becoming a channel member. It starts for just $1 a month, and it's the best way to help support me and allow me to continue making great guides just like this and giving informative and sometimes rant and rage-filled feedback, but you're always going to get it raw and unfiltered from me. I'm not going to change what I'm saying because I'm sponsored by X company or Y company. And I have friends that are. I'm not dissing on anybody who is. You got to make a living, but that's not what I do here. So if you like what you see, consider becoming a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. All right, back to the rest of the video. So what does that mean? Well, the meta is opened up. A lot of people are very upset and they feel like there's only going to be a couple of styles of play. There's actually going to be more styles of play currently, as of things stand right now, in the new patch than there was before. They are completely different styles of play, completely different setups, but there are actually going to be more and better options. Guys, it's been Arcanist beams in most groups for the past 2 years, okay? So we're actually going to see something other than that. This is a great move in the direction of variety. Now, you might be somebody who you had a favorite build or a favorite setup or whatever, and now that's ruined. And yeah, That's just true. Again, don't blame me, blame Zoss, but it does look like if you're trying to go on a single target class or single class setup, it just you're going to get left way, in the dust by everybody else. They're going to gain, 40k damage over you on a max theoretical parse. So even in content, they're going to be parsing way higher than you. Doesn't mean you can't still use your build, but yeah, you are going to get left in the dust. Again, I'm just reporting, guys, to please don't kill the messenger. Other changes here on the PTS were relatively small. There was a lot of bug fixes and what have you. The other thing is that they completely gutted Pearls of El Nofe and Pillager's Prophet. Those sets will no longer be ran in the current setup. I hope they change it. I did a standalone video on that. You can go check that on the channel if you want to hear more about it. But overall, nothing else has changed from my recent video where I talked about the new meta. There's a handful of class skill lines that are going to be really good for tanks and healers. There are also flex spots on tanks and healers to allow you to take whatever class you want. And then for DPS, we'll see more as we go along. I'll definitely have some builds. Right now, Arcanist, Crow, Nightblade is looking really powerful, but there are other options out there. The other major thing actually that I'll say for DPS is that if you want to do an Ice Warden, and you want a multi-class, they actually gave us another 5% frost damage just across the board. That's pretty huge. I don't think it quite makes Frost Wardens, at least that I could figure out, meta, but it does make them more viable now. So that's pretty cool, and maybe they'll continue to lean into this. Anyways, that's it for the updates for this week, guys. If you want to hear more, you want to talk, you want to ask questions, come by the live streams. Every Monday and Friday, I'm doing talking live streams where it's a great time to come ask questions about what's changing, what's going on, and we can keep you up to date. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you in the next one.